So I have a hot take. AI is not just a.
We can play that one once again, Kalpesh bhai, or any
Oh,
new one also.
okay, sure. I'll play the same again.
मैं ज्ञानानंद स्वभावी हूँ। मैं ज्ञानानंद स्वभावी हूँ। मैं हूँ अपने में स्वयं पूर्ण, पर कि मुझ में कुछ गंध नहीं। मैं अरस अरूपी स्पर्शी, पर से कुछ भी संबंध नहीं। मैं रंग राग से भिन्न, भेद से भी मैं भिन्न निराला हूँ। मैं हूँ अखंड चैतन्य पिंड, निज रस में रमने वाला हूँ। मैं ही मेरा करता धरता, मुझ में पर का कुछ काम नहीं। मैं मुझ में रहने वाला हूँ, पर में मेरा विश्राम नहीं। मैं शुद्ध बुद्ध अविरुद्ध एक, पर परिणति से अप्रभावी हूँ। आत्मानुभूति से प्राप्त तत्व, मैं ज्ञानानंद स्वभावी हूँ।
Hi everyone, Jai Chinendra. I would like to welcome all of you, and I would like to thank all of you for joining our Paryushan series. This is a joint initiative of YJP, which is Young Jain Professionals across North America, and JENA. And today we have Kalpesh Rupani, who lives in Toronto. And just a little bio about him. He enjoys exploring different concepts of Jainism. And he also enjoys reading Jain Shastra a lot. And one of his favorite is Tattva Sutra, and among others are Dravya Sangrah, Samesar. And he also runs Pathshala in Toronto, Brampton Temple. And professionally, he works as a software consulting manager at Oracle. I also had a chance of meeting him yesterday at the Pratishtha ceremony in our Oshawa temple. And I got a chance to meet his family and his two lovely daughters who are still 8. And they're doing Ikasana, which was a great sight to watch. And the kind of sanskars which Kalpesh is giving to his daughters is really outstanding, I believe, especially in today's world. And that's why I think he's like the right speaker who about our topic for today, which is having a correct understanding of Tapp in Jainism. So, Kalpesh, over to you.
Hey, Rupali, thanks a lot. I really appreciate the introduction. I think that's a little bit too flamboyant, I guess, but and flabbergasting, but I still appreciate it. And I really thank the Young Jain Professional Group over here to take this initiative of starting this series of lectures on various Jain topics, as well as I think taking this initiative and giving me the opportunity to present on this stage. So again, I'm thankful to all of you as well, and also the participants for joining and attending these sessions. So I think Rupali, is there anything else before we get started?
No, I think you can start your presentation.
All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen first. All right. So today's presentation is, or today's session is about understanding of Vrat and Tapp in Jainism. So having the correct understanding, because we all have have some understanding of Vrat and Tapp in Jainism, but then it's also important to have the correct understanding of Vrat and Tapp in Jainism. So that's the topic that I have chosen. I feel like this is going to be an important topic because particularly during Paryushan, we all try to do Tapp and Vrat in some or the other way, and that's definitely a good thing. But then if we are doing it with the correct understanding, it's going to be very beneficial for us. So that's basically the main purpose of this session. And then what I would also like to do is, I understand that it may be difficult sometimes to hold the questions until the end. So I think a lot of you have been already doing in the previous sessions. You can actually put some questions, or whenever you have a question, just put it in the chat. And it doesn't matter, what kind of question it is. All questions are good questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, and then I'll try my best to reserve at least 10 minutes, if not more, towards the end of the session, so that way we can at least I can try to answer some of the questions, if not all of them. Okay. So that's the intent. But we have a lot of content to cover today, and in case if we run out of time, that's totally fine. I'll cut short on some of the slides that I have, and on some slides I may go a little bit faster, so that way I'm able to kind of cover the main the content or the main crux of the presentation. So that's again intentional. If we have to skip a few slides, that's totally fine. All right. With that, we'll get started. So what is basically Vrat in Jainism, right? So Vrat can be defined in two ways. One is from the Vyavhar standpoint, and other is from the Nishchay standpoint. So let's look at the definition from the Vyavhar standpoint. Vyavhar means perceived reality. Perceived reality is one aspect, and the absolute reality is other aspect. So in Jainism, we have to understand a lot of these things from what is perceived as the fact and what is the absolute fact. Okay. So coming to the definition of vrat, from the perceived reality standpoint or from the vyavhar standpoint, it is the renunciation of the 5 sins. There are 5 major sins, or we classify the sins in 5 major buckets. So that's the violence, lies, stealing, sexual desires, and parikra, right? So in Hindi, we call it as hinsa, jhoot, chori, kushil, and parikra. So these are the 5 sins. So when we try to renounce these 5 sins with vows or commitments, that is basically the definition of vrat from the vyavhar standpoint. Now, vrat from the vyavhar standpoint is a positive thought, right? We are trying to be in good state of mind, in positive state of mind. We are trying to have positive thoughts. So that's basically the definition of vrat from the vyavhar standpoint. Okay, it's renunciation of the 5 sins with vows or commitments. Now, what's the definition of vrat from the nischay standpoint? So the opposite of vyavhar is nischay. Nischay is the absolute reality. So from the nischay standpoint, vrat can be defined as a state of detachment from the world in absence of passions like anger, pride, deceit, and greed. So this is basically a state of detachment from the world in absence of passion, right? You are feeling detached from the world. You are focused on your own self, on your own soul, and you have absence of these 4 kashais, which is the anger, pride, deceit, and greed. So that's the definition of vrat from the nischay standpoint. Okay. Now, and then the other point over here is that from the nischay standpoint, vrat is basically being in the shuddha bhav. Shuddha bhav is pure state of being or pure thoughts. Okay. So this is basically the definition of vrat, basically from the vyavhar standpoint and the nischay standpoint. What we need to think is that when we are doing the vrat, right, when we are doing any of these kind of, we are taking these kind of vows, we need to think that are we really going towards nischay or not? Do we have the goal of nischay in our mind or not? That is something we need to keep in mind, because vyavhar is always done with the goal of doing or achieving nischay. Okay. If we are doing the vyavhar without the nischay as our goal, then we are not really making enough progress, or we are not really making the progress in the right direction. We are stopping somewhere. Okay. So that's something we need to keep in mind. This is actually a very big topic. Vyavhar and nischay itself is a big topic. There are further classifications of nischay, there are further classifications of vyavhar and all the stuff. So maybe some time in the future, if we get a chance, we can try to talk about that in more detail. But I'm not going into all those details right now. Okay. So that's the definition of vrat from the vyavhar and the nischay standpoint. There is another definition of Tapp. So basically, I'm just treating the vrat and Tapp in the same bucket as part of this presentation. So we're not trying to kind of treat them as separate entities. So there's another definition of Tapp. So there's the definition of Tapp is basically Ichha Nirodha Tapaha. What it means is the cessation of desires with proper understanding is austerity or Tapp. Okay. So the cessation of desires, giving up your desires, but the most important point is with proper understanding. If we are, so here we are not trying to exactly suppress our desires. The definition, it says cessation of desires. We are giving up our desires. And why are we giving up our desires? Because we understand, we have the proper understanding of, or behind the reasons of giving up these desires. So when we give up these desires with proper understanding, that is called Tapp. Okay. So for example, we do anshan, like we do upas, or we, take vows that I'm going to eat only certain number of items. We do aimbel, those kind of things, right? So here we are giving up the desires, but we are not forcing ourselves to give up the desires. We are giving up the desires with proper understanding. Okay. That is the proper, definition of Tapp. If we are forcing ourselves to give up something, that's Well, we are following that, from physically, like we are avoiding certain things, but then at the same time, that's not the real definition of Tapp. Okay, so that's another aspect over here. So let's take an example to understand this point. Someone renounces the use of honey after understanding the hinsa involved in consuming honey, right? So, today's session to an extent is extension of Rupali's session that she conducted last Friday, because she explained, the various Tapps and, a lot of aspects related to Tapp. So this is kind of, to an extent continuation of that. So we took the example of honey. We understood like why honey is not something that we, we discourage as Jains to consume honey, because the amount of violence that's involved in consuming honey is quite high, right? So when now let's say there is, you have a friend of yours, or there's a child in your family, and that person likes honey a lot, right? So let's say there are two children, okay? There's a first child, there's a second child. The first child, you tell that first child that, hey, it's Paryushan going on, at least avoid consuming honey during Paryushan. Honey or items that, that have honey as their ingredient, stop consuming those items, at least during Paryushan. So you take some vows, you take some vows to avoid consuming honey for these 8 days or for the 10 days, right? So that's the first thing. But this first child doesn't understand why the person, we need to avoid honey. Doesn't understand, doesn't know the reasons why we want to avoid honey. The second child, you explain that, hey, there's a lot of violence involved in consuming honey, and when you perform these kind of violence, when you consume honey, obviously, you are also binding bad karmas. So when the other child understands this, the child says on his own that, hey, you know what? If there is violence involved in honey, consuming honey, then I want to give up. At least for the next 8 days or 10 days, I don't want to have, honey, at least for that period, if not for a longer duration. So in this case, the first child is kind of being forced to stop consuming honey. In the second case, the child understands the reasons behind not consuming honey. So both the children may kind of not consume honey in, during this 8 or 10 days, but then the reasons or the understanding behind not consuming honey is different, right? For both the children. And here, what we are saying is Ichcha Nirodha Tapaha. That means that you are giving up your desires, or you are, getting rid of these desires, but with proper understanding. So the proper understanding is important. So when we as adults also do Tapp, right? We need to understand why are we doing the Tapp. We need to do it with proper understanding, right? What is the reason behind doing the Tapp, right? I think one of the poll question that I think Rupali had kept is that what is the reason for doing these upas and Tapp and all the stuff, right? One of the reasons was, do we want to lose weight? That was one of the options that she had given, right? So yes, we are not doing Tapp because we want to lose weight. We are not doing Tapp, right, from the religious standpoint, because we want to keep our body healthy or those kind of things. And then we are also not giving desires, suppressing our desires, or we are forcing ourselves to give the desires, because we understand the reason behind the Tapp, doing the Tapp. We need to understand that what's the purpose of doing the Tapp, the reason behind doing the Tapp, and then we need to do it with proper understanding. Then the Tapp really gives us the best results. Okay. Otherwise, it still helps us to, in other ways, but it won't really help in the path of moksha. So we'll talk about that a little bit in the next few slides. Okay. So the point I went, mentioned over here is that Tapp should happen naturally, with ease, not forcefully, right? We should not force ourselves to do the Tapp. It should, like, we understand that, hey, doing the Tapp, is going to help me, help my soul in certain ways, and that's why we do Tapp. Okay. This is not exactly related to the point I'm making here, but I just got this point in my mind. So there's another point in Jainism that says that how much Tapp should you do, right? How much Tapp? Should you do 2 first? Should you do 5 first? Should you do 8 first? Should you do a mass command? How much Tapp should you do, right? So the answer is, the simple one-word answer is Yatha Shakti. Yatha Shakti. Yatha Shakti means as per your ability. as per your physical ability in this case. If you have the physical ability to do upas, well and good, do it. But you don't want to do upas when you're not physically capable of doing it, or you don't want to do upas when you think you're going to actually get angry because of not eating food or being hungry, right? Because the natural tendency is that when you're hungry, it becomes difficult to control your senses. It becomes difficult to control your kashais, difficult to control your anger. So you don't want to get yourself angry. You don't want to be like, getting into those negative thoughts and then doing stuff, right? So whatever you can do, yatha shakti. Yatha shakti means as per your ability, physical ability, you want to do only that amount of stuff. Don't try to stretch in doing the stuff. So that's not exactly related to the point, but kind of, it's still, in a way relates to it. So that's why I just brought it up. All right, moving on to the next slide. So what's the purpose of doing stuff? Right? So let's talk about it. So in Tattva Sutra, there is a sutra, it says, Tapsa Nirjara Cha. Okay? Tapsa Nirjara Cha. So what it means is that Tap is also a reason for Nirjara. So, in the context of Tattva Sutra, the prior sutras, they are talking of like samvar. Okay? And then there's this sutra, it says Tapsa Nirjara Cha. That means it is saying that Tap is also a reason for Nirjara. So that what it means is that Tap is a reason for both samvar and Nirjara. Okay? Tap is a reason for both samvar and Nirjara. Now, what is samvar and what is Nirjara? So, if you are trying to stop the bondage of new karma, that is called samvar. Stopping the bondage of new karma is samvar. And if you are trying to shed the existing karma bound to the soul, that is called Nirjara, right? So we have bound a lot of karma. It could be good karma as well as bad karma. But here mainly we are talking about the bad karma, right? So because of various activities that we do on a daily basis, and we may not realize that, but because of the activities of our mind, speech, and the body, we end up binding karmas, right? And a lot of these are basically bad karmas. So for example, if I just drive my car and go for a drive and then come back for whatever purpose, I would end up causing harm to so many infinite living beings. Actually, I would end up causing harm to infinite living beings. Not only just the thrust living beings, like the living beings that we can that can move, or that can that have more than one senses, but even a lot of one sense organisms gets hurt just by driving the car for a certain distance and coming back to home, right? So likewise, we are continuously binding new karmas, and so we have accumulation of lot of these karmas. And when we fall sick, or when we have these kind of pratikul paristhiti, which is basically any negative circumstances, that's basically the manifestation of these bad karmas, right? That's an example, by the way. So the point is that we want to reduce the bondage of the karmas, the existing karmas that's already attached to our soul, that we have already bound, right? And we want to reduce the bondage in such a way that they are shed. We shed those karmas, or we separate or get rid of those karmas before these karmas come into fruition, right? Before they give the result of these, they cause us any harm or cause us these negative circumstances, right? So the purpose of Tapp is to stop the bondage of new karma, as well as shed the existing karma bound to the soul, okay, which is called Nirjara. So stopping the bondage of new karma is samvar, and shedding the existing karma is Nirjara, okay? So that's basically the main purpose of Tapp, okay? But if you attended one of the earlier session which we had regarding the four gatis and the soul transition, we had seen one reason for going to Dev Gati. So there is a sutra in Tattva Sutra. It says, Sarag Sayyam Sayyama Sayyam Kam Nirjara Baltapansi Devasya. Okay, this is again from Tattva Sutra. So what does it mean? So we are not going to this sutra basically explains the reasons for going to the Dev Gati. Okay, And here I'm just focusing on this particular aspect. It says Bal Tapansi. Bal Tapansi means Bal Tap. Bal Tap. Bal means child, and Tap. So the Tap done in a childish way. Tap that is done in a childish way. Childish way means when you do some tap without the proper understanding, or you just kind of blindly do tap without really understanding, why you're doing it, what is the reason of doing the tap, and what is the true way of doing the tap, then that is not the reason for nirjara. That is not the reason for shedding of existing karmas, but it's actually the reason of binding new positive karmas or new good karmas. And that in turn causes the Devayushya, right? So we understood the reasons for going to the Devgati, right? So Bal Tap means doing the tap in a childish way is actually the reason for binding punya, which in turn leads to Devgati or Devayushya. But it is not the reason for samvar or nirjara. Okay? So here, this is the translation or meaning in English. It says, childish or ignorant austerities or penance, which is tap, performed without the right faith and knowledge, leads to punya, which is influx of good karma, which in turn is a reason for Devayushya, not samvar or nirjara. Okay? So we are doing tap. We want to do tap not to bind more punya, not to bind more positive karma. That's not the intent, or that should not be the intent of doing tap. The intent of doing tap is nirjara. Main purpose is to do nirjara, which is to shed the existing karmas which are already bound to our soul. Okay? So there's a very fine line. If you are doing tap with proper understanding, it can become the reason for nirjara. But if you're doing tap without proper understanding, it actually becomes reason for binding new karmas. Though it is good karma, positive karma, but it actually still becomes a reason for binding new karmas. So now we need to introspect and we need to see, what are we doing? Are we trying to bind new karmas? Are we trying to bind new punya? Or are we trying to actually get rid of the existing karmas? Right? And the purpose of, if you want to go to moksha, which one should we opt for? Nirjara or binding new punya? And I think Priyank Bhai covered it yesterday, right? He said that if you want to go to moksha, the balance of the good karmas and the bad karmas both has to be zero. That means our punya karma also has to be zero. So if you want to go to moksha, we are not here to bind new karmas. We are actually here to reduce the balance of karmas, right? So that's important. So we need to understand this, and we need to ensure that, are we trying to bind new karmas by doing the tap without proper understanding, or we are trying to understand the tap and the reasons behind doing tap properly, and we are doing the tap in the right way so that we actually end up doing nirjara, not binding new karma. All right. So that's one of the important points. Good. So now there's a time to do a poll. So let's do this poll. If you could bring up the poll questions, please. So which of the following is a bigger tap or austerity? So the first option is Swadhyay, second is Anshan, third is Kaiklesh, and fourth is Ras Parityag. Okay, so I think we have the answers. I think there's 100% participation at this stage, looks like. So there are 44% people have opted for Swadhyay. There are 28% for Anshan, and then there are other remaining percentage for the remaining two options. So 28% people think that Anshan means fasting. Fasting is a bigger tap amongst all these four options. And then there are 44 people think Swadhyay is actually a bigger tap. So the correct answer is Swadhyay. For everyone's knowledge, the correct answer is Swadhyay, right? So see, anyone who answered this question incorrectly, that's totally fine, right? Because you answered it incorrectly, so that helps you to now gain this knowledge that actually Swadhyay is actually a bigger tap in all of these four options, right? So let me go to the next slide. So Rupali had covered this slide in detail, so I'm not going to discuss or like explain these 12 type of taps in detail, but a very basic understanding over here. And unfortunately, this is in Hindi. I hope most of you can understand it, but if not, then don't worry about it. This exact slide or the name of these 12 taps are actually there in the slide deck that Rupali had presented last Friday, so you can refer to that. But basically, taps can be classified into two broad categories: the Bahya tap and the Abhyantar tap. Bahya tap is basically the physical tap, right? The tap that you do with the involvement of your body, the physical tap, that is the Bahya tap. And the Abhyantar tap or the Antarang tap is basically the tap that you do with your mind, with your thoughts involved, right? So that's the Abhyantar tap. So there are six subcategories of Bahya tap, and there are six subcategories of Abhyantar tap. Okay, and I told on that session that the order in which these taps are mentioned, they are actually in the ascending order of the intensity or their impact, their power, basically, right? So Anshan is actually at the number one. That means it's least impactful, right? Staying hungry is actually least impactful. Then you have Aumodharya, you have Vritti Parisankhya, Ras Parityag, Vivit Sayashan, Kai Klesh, and all those things, right? And then, so not going through all of these, but Swadhyay is actually at number 10. Swadhyay is at number 10. It is just below Vyutsarg and Dhyan, right? That means Swadhyay is actually a very powerful form of tap. Swadhyay is a very powerful form of tap. Just reading the scriptures, the Jain scriptures, or listening to the religious discourses, that's actually a much more powerful and effective form of tap as compared to being hungry, right? So that's a very interesting point, right? That's what we discussed in the poll questions. So let me move on to the next slide in the interest of time. All right, so that's the time for the other poll. Okay, if an animal remains hungry for multiple days, can be regarded as tap.
Just one quick point, Kalpesh bhai. I know in the poll now on the top it says 100%, but usually it's like either 18 or 23, or there's like a count. So it's weird
Okay.
how Zoom shows it. So I think you might say 100% have answered, but actually it's the count that have answered. I don't want others to feel that, hey, I didn't answer, but he's saying 100%. So that's why I'm just pointing it out.
Oh, got it, got it. Yeah, I see 2%. I see like there's one which is like 25 out of 39 participated, and that says 64%, and there's another which says 100%. Got it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thanks for.
Even I got confused when I was looking at it, so I thought I'd let me clarify.
Okay. All right. So I think there are 25 people who have participated so far, but I think in the interest of time, we'll move forward. So I think, I think everyone got the answer right, and that's so surprising, right? Like 25 of 25 who have participated got the answer right. So none of you feel that if an animal remains hungry for multiple days, it is tough. So that's actually correct. That's absolutely correct, right? So when the animal remains hungry for many days, it's actually not tough, right? That's because they did not do it voluntarily in the first place. Like they did not intend to remain hungry. They were forced to remain hungry because of the circumstances, right? So that's one. And then they did it without understanding. They remained hungry without understanding. First of all, they did not even do it like remain hungry willfully, right? So that's the first thing. But even if they did remain hungry, right? They did it without understanding, like what is the reason for being tough or doing tough, and what are the benefits of doing tough, and what's the right way of doing tough. They did not understand any of those. So just remaining hungry is not tough. So that kind of applies to us also as human beings, right? If you are just remaining hungry without really understanding the reason for doing tough, or having proper understanding of the tough, then that's actually not tough, right? If it applies to the animals, it applies to us also as human beings, right? So that's another important point over here. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so I'll go through this a little bit quickly in the interest of time. So we talked about the physical tapp or the bahya tapp. So there are 6 types of physical tapps, and then there are 6 types of mental tapps, which is the abhyantara tapp. Mental tapp is where our thoughts and mind is involved, whereas physical tapp, we are doing it through our body, right? So one of the main purpose of doing the bahya tapp or the physical tapp is to assist with the abhyantara tapp, right? So for example, when we do fast or upas, the intent is to renounce the attention to the worldly activities and focus on religious activities or our soul, right? Because we eat 3 times a day normally, but then when we do upas, if you do ekasana, then you eat just once. So at least you are cutting down the time that you spend on eating, at least on 2 occasions, right? And if you're doing upas, then you're totally renouncing the food for that day. That means, you're freeing up your time. Not only you're freeing up your time, but when you are not, like, the food has impact on your thoughts. We discussed that on the session that we had last Friday, right? So when you are not eating anything, your mind is not influenced by the food because you're not consumed anything in the last few hours at least, right? So your thoughts are kind of, in a positive state, or they have the tendency to be in a positive direction because there is no food that's trying to impact your thoughts, right? We talked about Vigai, the Lagu Vigai, Ma Vigai, and all the stuff. So that has impact on your thoughts. So the point is that the purpose of actually doing the bahya tapp is to assist with abhyantara tapp, right? And then I think one of the question or one of the point was that solitude, right? Solitude, maintaining solitude or living alone for at least a certain period of time. That is also one type of bahya tapp. Again, the purpose of doing that tapp is actually to help you focus on your soul, focus on, reducing your rag, dvesh, kashais, all those things, right? And then focusing on your soul, so that way you can understand the nature of your soul and you can be in a very pure state of thoughts, as to the extent possible, right? So that's the purpose of doing the bahya tapp. But if we are doing the bahya tapp without doing the abhyantara tapp, or without keeping the abhyantara tapp in our goal as one of our goals, then the bahya tapp is not really of much use, right? So here the second point is that if you're not achieving anything internally, the external tapp is not of real help on the path to moksha, right? Because if we're just remaining hungry, for example, I'm just giving an example. So if I do ikasan or upas and then think that, hey, I've done upas, so I don't have much to do, right? I don't have anything to eat, and physically I'm going to be a little bit weak today, so I'm not going to go out and play, or I'm not going to do any physical activities. So let me just sit on my couch, watch TV, right? And then I watch a movie, right, on that day. Then is my bahya tapp of any real use? No, my bahya tapp is of no use. The bahya tapp, the reason for doing upas is that I free up the time. I try to get my thoughts in a positive state of mind, so that way I can actually do some swadhyay. I can learn something new about my religion. I can, be in pure state of mind or pure thoughts, shuddha bhav, right? That is the purpose. So the purpose of doing this bahya tapp or the external tapp or the physical tapp is to help you with the internal or the mental tapp. If you are not doing anything mentally, if we're just remaining hungry, then that's not real tapp, right? Even if you're doing upas, even if you're doing mas command, right, or masak shaman, so basically the upas for 30 days, that's of no use, right? So it's better, and these are some strict words, but I'm still telling this. It's better to do an ikasan than upas, but then to do swadhyay while doing ikasan and not doing swadhyay while doing upas, right? Because we're just remaining hungry, that's not real tapp. We just discussed that, right? Otherwise, animals will regard the animals as doing more tapp than us, right? Because they remain more hungry than us, right? We probably remain hungry during the Paryushan. We do it for a few days, right? Animals do it very often, right, in the entire year. So if just remaining hungry was considered as tapp, then animals probably would be more tapasvi than us. But that's not the case. That's not the case, right? So that's the point. We need to we need to move forward mentally, right? We need to do Tapp, mental Tapp, the Abhyantar Tapp, while doing the Bahya Tapp. Only then our Bahya Tapp is really fruitful or really helpful. Otherwise, just we are remaining hungry, we are accumulating good karmas, we are binding punyas, we'll go to Devgati, but then we'll keep, moving to, like, we'll not really be making any progress on the path of moksha, right? So that's the main crux of this slide. Okay, so I did cover this point that, if remaining hungry was Tapp, animals we'd consider the animals doing more Tapp than us, but that's not the case, right? And then we also talked about Swadhyaya, which is, the 10th highest Tapp in the list of Tapps. So Swadhyaya is actually such a very powerful Tapp, right? But we sometimes don't realize that. And we, even in our temples, basically what we do is we felicitate people based on the number of uppas they did. But we don't say that, hey, who did 5 hours of Swadhyaya or 10 hours of Swadhyaya or 15 hours of Swadhyaya in this Paryushan, and we're going to felicitate them. Do we have any Jain center doing that? I have not seen any. Unfortunately, that's unfortunate piece, right? That's the case. But that's the point that's why we are having this session, so that we can understand this. That Swadhyaya is actually more powerful Tapp than Uppas, right? So not saying that don't do Uppas, but saying that prioritize Swadhyaya over Uppas. That's all I'm saying. Okay. All right. So one of the other aspect is, how do you measure the outcome of your Tapp, right? If I did, let's say, 1 Ikasan, I did 1 Uppas, I did 8 Uppas, that's a tie, right? So then how do I measure the outcome of the Tapp? How can I really measure and understand whether this Tapp has actually helped me or not, right? So we need to see that, if you're doing Uppas, or if you're, let's say, someone is doing a tie, if you're remaining, like doing Uppas for 8 days, you want to see after Uppas whether your desire or your liking for food has reduced or not, right? Whether it has helped us to reduce our kashais, our anger, pride, deceit, and greed, if they have reduced by doing any form of Tapp, not just the Abhyantar Tapp, but even the Bahya Tapp, right? Then you can say that, hey, your kashais have reduced. That means your Tapp has actually given you the result, the intended result it was supposed to give, right? If we feel detached from the world, we have the vairagya, right? We have less parigraha. Then yes, that is how we can say that yes, the Tapp has really helped us. If we don't see any of these improvements, then the Tapp has not really helped us. Okay. So let's say I like ice cream a lot. I like pani puri a lot. But then if I do the Tapp and then I say that, hey, you know what? For the next 8 days, I'm not going to be able to eat ice cream. I'm not going to be able to eat pani puri. So, after 8 days, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to eat ice cream. I'm going to eat pani puri, right? So if I'm going to have these kind of thoughts while I'm doing Uppas, then, all I'm doing is I'm suppressing my desire for 8 days, but I'm not really giving up my desires with proper understanding, right? That's what we saw in I think the very first or the second slide, right? So then that's not really, that Tapp, that we remaining hungry for those 8 days has not really given any substantial result, right? We may have accumulated karma, good karmas, because of remaining hungry for 8 days, but that's it. That's not going to help us move forward on the path to moksha. Okay, Tapp we are doing so that we can move forward on the path to moksha. All right. I think let's move on.
We have a question that if someone is not doing Swadhyaya, then what should be the starting point for someone? Like, how can they start doing it?
Yeah, Swadhyaya, right? So basically, to start doing Swadhyaya, there are a lot of ways. So, fortunately, in today's world, we have a lot of Swadhyaya being conducted online, like, these kind of sessions in different languages. So, identify a good speaker, or, approach someone who has, some basic knowledge of Jainism, and, ask for recommendation that, hey, who are the good speakers? What kind of videos I can, go through on YouTube? There are a lot of live sessions going on, as well as recorded videos available on YouTube. And then assess at what level you are. If you are in, you have some basic understanding of Jainism and you want to move forward, then you can go for that mid-level Swadhyayas. If you are at the initial level, you figure out, try to understand the basics of Jainism. there are ask for recommendation. We talked about that, right? And for Pathshala, we have the Balbodh 1, 2, and 3. We have Vitrag Vigyan, we have Tattva Gyan, all those books, you can read those. So there are different ways. Just ask for recommendation from someone who has, decent knowledge of, these things. You have books, you have your YouTube videos, and you have these kind of online sessions as well. And then, start attending those. So that will be a good starting point. And once you start understanding these things, then you can, you'll know which granth or which books you want to read, right? Tattva Sutra, for example, is a good granth, right? So if you have some basic understanding, then you can go through Tattva Sutra. There are a lot of recordings, and good swadhyaya is available on Tattva Sutra. There is Dravya Sangra, as I said. That again talks about some basic concepts. There is Chardala. Chardala is amazing. It's amazing granth. Chardala. So, you ask for these kind of recommendations, and then depending on your level, right, you can scale up in a systematic way. So that's a short answer.
Maybe Kalpesh bhai, just one quick tip to add over here, which worked for me also in terms of Swadhyaya, is that you can actually start with making a list of questions that you have, which you think are not answered or which you think you don't understand, and you can reach out to people like Kalpesh bhai or any of these scholars, etc., who know, and ask these questions, because many a times similar questions have crossed their mind, and that, like, getting answers to those questions will pique some curiosity to then understand more about it. So there is
Yeah.
also the way that Kalpesh bhai highlighted. But what I found in that sometimes it happens is that you are not even sure that whether you want to read this sutra or book or etc. Right? Like you don't know. So going with your questions and getting those clarified and understanding that how they were answered might get you to be more curious and then embark on this path of exploring more questions and answers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I may not have the time to cover, but Swadhyaya is actually what transformed me. A few years back, just few years back, I did not really have much interest in Jainism. And then, once I attended some Swadhyayas, I was actually in the US at that time. So I used to live in St. Louis. And then once I actually attended some Swadhyayas, that is when I actually got this curiosity. I learned some very basic concepts, and then that's what invoked the curiosity. And then that's where I started exploring more and more. And then that's how I actually, got the interest in Jainism, and I gained the knowledge. Yeah.
She's awake.
All right. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, so this is a very important slide. So we'll try to cover at least 2 slides, and then if I'll open it for questions, and then if we have more time, we'll cover more slides. But I'll just try to cover 2 slides. And this is one of the most important slides. So who is a true vrati? Means observer of vows, right? So there's a sutra in Tattva Sutra. It says Nishalyo Vrati. It says Nishalyo Vrati. Okay. So this is a sutra in Tattva Sutra, just 2 words, Nishalyo Vrati. But these 2 words have a lot of substance in it, a lot of content in it. So let's understand what it means. Nishalyo Vrati. So who is a true Vrati? Who is Nishalya? Okay. What is Shalya? Shalya means thorn, kante. In Hindi we say kante or kanta, right? So Nishalyo, the one who doesn't have any of those thorns, is a true Vrati. So which thorns are we talking about, right? So let's look at those. So it says a true observer of vows is one who is free from the piercing thorns. Piercing thorns are called shalyas. Okay. So there are 3 shalyas in Jainism, right? 3 thorns in Jainism, 3 type of thorns. So figuratively, obviously. So the first is Maya Shalya. Okay. The thorn of deceit. This is the thorn of hypocrisy or dishonesty, right? So the vrati, the person who is taking vrat, should be free of Maya, or she should be free of deceit, hypocrisy, or dishonesty. Okay. So that's the first point. The second point is Mithya Shalya. Okay. So the second thorn is the wrong belief. Mithya is wrong belief. So this is the most and the most fundamental thorn, basically. So mithya shalya means it refers to the deluded worldview, basically not perceiving the reality as it is, right? That is mithya shalya. So vows taken without the right belief lack proper foundation. Okay. So what it means is that if we have a wrong belief in our mind, if we have the mithya shalya in our in our thoughts and mind, then we cannot really be a true vrati, or we cannot really observe the vows in the right way. So we need to give up mithyatva. We need to have the right knowledge, the right understanding of the universe, not just Jainism, the overall universe, right? When we have the right understanding, when we perceive the reality in its right form, right? And we have this, we have the samyak darshan, or we get rid of our mithyatva. After that, we can actually have or observe the vrats in the right, in the best possible way. Okay, so we need to get rid of our maya shalya, or the deceit. We need to get rid of mithya shalya, or our wrong belief. And then the third shalya is nidan shalya. Nidan. Okay, so the nidan is basically the thorn of craving for future rewards. Basically, what it means is nidan means nidan. The Gujarati word for nidan is niyano, right? So some of you may be aware of this word in Gujarati. It's called niyano. In Hindi, it is called nidan. So this basically what it means is the desire to barter or exchange spiritual practice for future worldly gains, right? So if you are saying that, hey, I'm going to do this stuff, I'm going to renounce eating certain food item for a certain period of time until my daughter gets admission in so and so college, or until my daughter is married to a good husband or a good person, or until I get a promotion in my job, or until I earn, my bank balance goes to a certain amount, right? So that is nidan. That means you are doing tapp, you are doing vrat, but in exchange you are expecting some worldly gains out of it, right? So that is called nidan. So you definitely, in Jainism, we should not do tapp or vrat for these kind of worldly gains. Why? I mean, I don't have the time to explain why. I can. We will take it as part of the question and answer sessions, but right now I'm just going to stop here on this point. Otherwise, it's going to take a lot of time. So, but we are not in Jainism. In other religions, they actually do this. They actually do this, and they don't even realize that that's wrong. It's incorrect. But in Jainism, we don't do tapp and vrat to get worldly gains. That is not the intent of doing tapp or vrat. It's because there's a negative repercussion of that. So that's the main reason. So anyway, just these two words, Nishalyo Vrati, that's there in Tattva Sutra, and it means that Vrat, the true Vrati or the true observer of vows, is basically Nishalya. Nishalya means without these thorns, and there are these three thorns: Maya Shalya, which is the the thorn of deceit; Mithya Shalya, which is the thorn of wrong belief; and then Nidan Shalya. Nidan is basically the thorn of craving for future rewards in exchange of these religious activities. Okay, so when we do tapp, we should not have any of these three, right? If we don't have any of these three, then our vrat or tapp is our true vrat or tapp. Otherwise, it doesn't really give us the right intended result that we should get out of doing this vrat or tapp. Okay. So this is a very important slide. Just whenever we do this vrat and tapp, we need to have this. Now the mithya shalya itself, right? If I want to explain that, that can take half an hour. We don't have the time, unfortunately, so I'm just going to leave it there. But that's very important part, and I can actually give some examples. Well, I think I should take this example at least. The trimming of weeds versus uprooting them entirely. So let me just talk about it just a little bit. I'll not take much time. But basically, see, in our garden, in our front yard, or even in backyard, right? We often see the weeds growing, and then we don't like the weeds. We want to get rid of the weeds, right? So what we do? There are two options. Either you just take your lawnmower and trim your weeds along with the grass when you trim it, right? So you just trim the weeds, but you don't uproot them. And then the second option is you actually uproot the weeds entirely. Okay. Doing tapp without samyak darshan is also like that, right? doing Tapp without the Samyak Darshan, what we are doing is we are trying to trim the weed. We are not trying to uproot it. So what happens is that you trim the weed goes away for some time, but then it grows because the root is still there, right? So in us, if we have the mithyatva or the mithyashalya within us, we have not achieved Samyak Darshan, we have the wrong beliefs. And in spite of that, if we are doing these, vrats and Tapp, we are taking these vows, what happens is we are trying to suppress these negative thoughts because of doing these vrats or these vows temporarily, but eventually the effect of these vrats or these vows will fade away, and because of our mithyatva, we'll come back to where we were earlier, right? These vows will help us gain some good punyas and all the stuff, good karmas, punya and all the stuff, but eventually it will not really help us move forward in the on the path of moksha. But if we uproot our mithyatva completely, that means if we attain Samyak Darshan, and if we get the right understanding, if we get the right belief, the right faith, and then when we do the Tapp, then that is when we are uprooting the weed completely. That means now it's not going to grow again because you have uprooted the weed directly, the weed of mithyatva directly from your soul, right? So now, your Tapp and Vrat is actually going to be more fruitful, or, it's actually going to be fruitful in the real sense. Okay. So on this point, let's move on to the next slide. The next slide is going to talk about this a little bit further. All right. So yeah.
Kalpesh, I just want to remind you it's 9:57. So
Okay.
I don't know how much content you have more, but yeah, just wanted to give you
Yeah,
the
good. Thanks. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll take this slide, and then if you want to do Q&A, we can. Otherwise,
Sure.
depending on everyone's availability, we can stop after.
Yeah.
Okay. So difference in Tapp with and without Samyak Darshan. So there is this. This is from Chadala. So it says Koti Janma Tap Tape Gyan Bin Karma Jare Je Gyani Ke Chin Mahi Trigupti Te Sahaj Karete. What it means? The amount of karma one sheds by practicing severe Tapp for millions of births, not millions of years, millions of births. So the amount of karma a person can shed by practicing Tapp for millions of births without the right knowledge, a person with self-realization, that is Samyak Darshan, sheds in a single moment, and effortlessly through the threefold restraint of mind, speech, and body. Okay, so if we keep doing Tapp without Samyak Darshan for millions of births and the amount of karma that we can shed, with Samyak Darshan, we can shed that much amount of karma in just one moment. Okay, Koti means crore. Crore is millions basically. So million, Koti Janma Tap Tape Gyan Bin Karma Jare Je means without the knowledge, the amount of karma that you can shed. Gyani Ke Chinmahi, that means a Samyak Drasti or a Gyani, within a moment, Trigupti Te Sahaj Karate. The same amount of karma the knowledgeable person can shed in just one moment. So that's it there in Chadala. Okay. And then the next, the sutra is also from Chadala. It says, Munivrat Dhar Ananta Bar Graviya Kupajayo. Nij Atma Gyan Bina Sukh Lesha Na Payo. That means we have taken Muni Diksha how many times? Infinite times. Ananta Bar. A soul or a living being that has taken Muni Diksha infinite number of times. And because of taking this Muni Diksha, this person or the soul was reborn in high heavens like the graveyard, right? So we have the 16 Devloks. As per Digambar, there are 16 Vaimanik Devs. As per Shvetambar, there are 12 Vaimanik Devs. And then after these 16 or 12 Devloks, there is the 9 graveyards. So the graveyard is very high Devlok. And you need lot of punya to go to the graveyard. So we, as our soul, as the Jeeves, have countless times taken the Muni Vrat. We have actually taken Muni Diksha countless times in our previous births. And because of these Muni Diksha, we accumulated so much good karmas that we went to the graveyards, those high Devloks, so many times, infinite times actually. But without the right knowledge of its own true self, the living being did not even get a trace of real happiness. Okay? So we have taken Muni Riksha so many times, and we have actually accumulated so much punya, but we have not really achieved the moksha, right? So that's what this is saying. And by the way, this is from Chhadala, but basically the same concept is accepted by the Shwetambar Panth as well. So here, all I'm trying to say is there's no ambiguity between Digambar and Shwetambar. Digambar and Shwetambar both accept both these sutras, basically. So that's the point. Okay. All right. So I think we don't have much time for the other slides. So I think I'll just go to the conclusion right away. And if you want to take a few questions after that, we'll do it. So basically, the simple conclusion or short conclusion is that the point is not to tell that, hey, stop doing tap, stop doing upas, stop doing vrat. That is not the point. The intent over here is that we want to prioritize samyak darshan over tap. Okay, if you are putting efforts in doing tap, vrat, upas, all these things, good, nothing bad. You're trying to probably move in the right direction. But samyak darshan, attaining samyak darshan is more important. And without the samyak darshan, the tap and the vrat cannot give you the right results. And with the samyak darshan, tap and vrat will like accelerate your path to moksha. So that's the only point we are trying to say. I mean, I'm not going through all the points listed over here, but the intent is to just to highlight the significance of samyak darshan over tap. So, while we're putting efforts to do tap and vrat, we also want to put efforts in attaining samyak darshan, right? Because the gain is just manifold. So that's the oral conclusion of this session. I know we are about time. I just wanted to check Rupali and Priyank bhai, if you're okay, we can go through maybe a few questions, maybe for the next 5 minutes. But if we are over time and then, if you want to close the session, that's fine too. I'm fine either way.
We can continue. We can continue to answer.
Okay. So are there any questions that you guys can call out that I can answer?
Yeah,
Or
there's
if anyone wants to just unmute and ask the questions, that's fine as well.
there's one here, Kalpesh. What is a clear, direct way to get rid of Mithyatva and achieve Samyak Darshan?
What is a clear, direct way? Okay, so I was anticipating this question. Yeah, so in very short terms, right? So there's a book called Moksha Prakashak, which has been written by Pandit Todarmalji, and in that book, right, he has actually mentioned this. So if you want to attain Samyak Darshan, knowledge is important. Knowledge is your first step. So first, put effort in reading the Jain Shastras and understanding the knowledge that is given to us by Keval Gyanis, right? Our Jain Shastras is based on the knowledge of Keval Gyanis. It's not based on my knowledge or anyone else's knowledge. It's based on knowledge of Keval Gyanis. So gain the knowledge that is there in Jainism, which has been provided to us indirectly by Keval Gyani. So that is the Tattva Gyan. So get the knowledge of the Tattva, get the knowledge of the mean, these concepts, these principles. Then once you have the knowledge, then you do, once you get the knowledge, do Tattva Chintan, right? So you think about this knowledge and then try to digest it, try to think about it, try to debate things in your own mind, try to understand these concepts, right? So once you read something, you understand something, once you read something, once you gain the knowledge, then you ponder over it, you think about it, you try to understand it, right? Try to debate things in your mind. Hey, how can this be true? How can that be true? And then once you ponder about it, once you think about it in more detail, that is your Tattva Chintan. And then because of your proper Tattva Chintan, you will get to Tattva Nirnay. Tattva Nirnay means then you will be able to conclude. Then you will have to have the faith in what you really understood, right? You will be able to conclude, you will be able to reach to the right conclusion, and you will be able to have the right faith. This right faith is actually Samyak Darshan, right? So there's a lot about it. Unfortunately, we are short of time, so I won't be able to go in more detail, but you'll realize that, your soul is one entity, and all the other dravyas, there are 6 types of dravyas in the universe. So out of all the 6 dravyas, your soul is one entity, and all the other 6 dravyas are separate from you. and you are able to focus on your soul. You are able to understand the nature of your soul, your characteristics of your soul. So once you understand these things, that and you have the right faith, that is your Samyak Darshan. And once you have Samyak Darshan, you will be able to feel your soul. You will be able to, in Hindi we say Anubhav. You are able to Anubhav your soul, right? So you are able to feel your soul, and you are able to realize that you are actually the soul. So that is your experiencing, or getting to the next stage of Samyak Darshan. So the first step is, Tattva Gyan. Second is Tattva Chintan, and third step is Tattva Nirnay. Okay, and then that leads to Samyak Darshan. So in short, these are the 3 steps. All right. Any other question? If anyone wants to, I'll just take one more question. If anyone wants to unmute and ask. If not, I think we can close it up over here.
Yeah, I see a lot of people are asking if there is a separate group in which you do any sessions on Swadhyay. I know there is a separate group, but even as young Jain professionals, we are trying to get a speaker series in which we can have Swadhyay, which would be led by Kalpesh, and also Priyank and some other speakers would be joining in. So please stay tuned for that, because I think the Tattva Charcha is more for, I'm not sure, but more for the Toronto folks, right? I'm not sure if others can be added to it.
Yeah. I mean, I do conduct it separately also, by the way. But I think let's start with through the YJP group. Rupali, as you mentioned, I think we're planning about something like that. So I think we are trying to have more sessions in going forward. So let's go through that, and then we can still have other sessions if needed. But yeah, I think we're planning for systematic sessions going forward. So we'll do that.
Yeah, through Young Jain professionals, we'll start organizing, like after Paryushan, we'll start organizing monthly or even fortnightly sessions just for Swadhyay. And okay, maybe we can close the session now. Kalpesh, do you want to recite Namokar Mantra for us?
Yeah, I'll just do one quick Jinvani Stuti. It'll just take a minute.
Sure, yeah.
स्याद्वादनय षट्द्रव्यगुणपर्याय और प्रमाण का जड़ कर्म चेतन बंधकारु कर्म के अवसान का कह कर स्वरूप यथार्थ जग का जो किया उपकार है उसके लिए जिन वाणी माँ को वंदना शत बार।